So the third test again is what resources you have available, or what are your assets. And as we've discussed in the prior two videos, you can see why neither the income nor the medical necessity tests really are tests at all. They're illusory. They don't really prevent you from getting benefits. This is the test. And in terms of determining resources and assets, the first question we have to ask is, are you married or are you single? Because whether you're, and do you have any dependents? Because depending upon whether you're married or single, or whether you have any children that are relying on you, or other form of dependent that are relying on you, that's going to determine how much you can have in non-exempt assets. The key word in this sentence is non-exempt. Why is that the key word? This is the key word because once you start calling things non-exempt, you're implying, maybe not so much implying, that there's another category of assets that are called exempt assets, right? And there's an enormous amount of assets that are exempt that have no impact on your eligibility for benefits at all. So before we even get to what are the maximums that you have in non-exempt assets, let's talk about what the exempt assets are. Because often people look at those exempt assets and they say, well, I can't qualify because I have all this stuff. And none of that stuff counts. The most common exempt assets that you can have are things like your home. And here in California, your home of any value is exempt. And your home is described as any property that you have defined as your principal residence. Whether or not you've ever lived in the house is irrelevant. It's your principal residence as long as you're living in it, your spouse is living in it, or if you're living in a facility, you have the intent to return home. The intent to return home does not mean you can ever go home. It means that if you were cured from your condition, would you want to remain in care or would you want to go home? And if you can reasonably say that that person would want to go home if their Alzheimer's was cured, or if their Huntington's disease was cured, or whatever it was, that home would be exempt. And under the current rules, it's exempt of any value. What else is exempt? Business property is exempt. So if you have a business that's generating income, if you're filing a business tax return, all of your business property is exempt. The income is going to count towards the income test, but the property itself is exempt. What else is exempt? IRAs and 401ks of any value are exempt so long as they're in a payment status. Mitt Romney had an IRA that was worth $34 million. And under the Medi-Cal program, that's considered an exempt asset, as long as he's drawing out the income on it. Again, it's going to impact the income test, but it does not impact his eligibility for benefits. What else is exempt? Rental property in many circumstances can be exempt. Life insurance can be exempt. Annuities can be exempt or unavailable. All these things can have no impact on your eligibility for benefits. Well, what's non-exempt? Pretty much everything else. So cash in the bank, CDs, and mutual funds, those investments are considered non-exempt, and you are going to have to do something to qualify for benefits. Now, the amount of non-exempt assets that you can keep depends upon, again, two factors. One, are you single or are you married? Do you have dependents? That's the first factor. The second factor is going to be where you're located. So if you are a single individual, the maximum amount of non-exempt assets that you can have is $2,000. You can have effectively an unlimited amount of exempt assets, but your non-exempt assets have to be below $2,000, and if you exceed $2,000, you have to take steps to qualify for benefits. So in this situation, your non-exempt assets for a single individual, regardless of where you're located, no more than $2,000. If you're a married couple and you're dealing with trying to get care at home, the maximum amount of non-exempt assets you can have is no more than $3,000. If you are a married couple and one of you is in a facility and one of you is at home, Medi-Cal is going to say that that married couple can have in excess of $117,000 in 2014. That, for most people, is not true. They can have considerably more than that. And there'll be a video in here, and certainly a lot of detail in the book about a program called Spousal Impoverishment that will talk about why and how that works, and why married couples can often keep considerably more than what Medi-Cal tells them that they can keep. And so we'll talk about that in a later video. So in terms of assets, it's really important to understand that this is the test for determining eligibility for Medi-Cal for most people who need long-term care costs. And it is incredibly important to understand the distinction between non-exempt and exempt assets, and not to confuse the two, because if you do, you may be opting out of programs.